We'll call the finance meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Blake Ellison,
Here.
Brad Ray,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
and Dick is excused.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to approval of the agenda.
Ron will make a motion to approve the agenda.
Brad will second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to public comment. Anyone for public comment in the room, online, or on the phone? Public comment, anyone in the room, online, or in the phone? And it looks like, so Dan or Lori, can you click on the hand for public comment, please?
Yeah. Mr. Valance, would you like to comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, this is Louis Valance. I am the gentleman that appeared before the regular board for the letter of support for bringing Amtrak service to northern Wisconsin. I was wondering if you guys would be willing to put that on for support for and during this committee for economic development to bring Amtrak service to northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Bring economic development, tourist dollars, bring access to quality healthcare, educational opportunities, and employment opportunities to the Ashland community, and equal access to the transportation network. So I'd like to have you consider a letter of support / resolution to bring Amtrak Hiawatha service up from Milwaukee through Green Bay, Escanaba, Michigan, into Duluth, Minnesota, in the eastern UP. If you'd be willing to do that, I can. You have my email. Can you email me the letter of support for this so I can get that over to WestDOT and to U.S. Department of Transportation, as there is a deadline for January for that grant for $5 billion. So if I can get this letter of support, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. This is public comment, so we can't respond to the request
No, that's
during
fine.
the meeting. We can't respond to the request during the meeting, but the board chair has your email and he can send you a response regarding your request. Is there anyone else for public comment? Anyone else in the room, online, or the phone for public comment? Moving on then, we'll go to number 4, discussion action items. Number 4A, approval of Finance and Economic Development Committee meeting minutes from October 16th.
Ron will make a motion. We accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
Brad will second.
Discussion?
I just had one item. The loan amount that we ended up, I think, approving in that meeting was over what we were allowed.
We approved less than the 10 million because they knew they didn't want to take the chance with us, our own normal debt levy. So I think it was 8 million. And in January or so, we'll be doing the 2 million again.
But in the finance meeting, we did approve the 10 million. When it went to the board, it
Right.
was 8 million.
Yeah,
So the minutes of this are
Yeah,
correct.
just in case.
It's just that it changed between this and the board meeting. Any other comments? Steve, I've got a question. It's on part C with the budget. And I don't want I'm going to ask you after the minutes, but I want to ask you, is it correct, the language that's used there on 4C? It says, Steve stated that they have tried to keep the 26 budget at the maximum levy. Steve has also stated there is, and this is my question, 48,559 available to use from past year's levy that can be used. So when we say past years there on that levy limit worksheet, there's the 48,559. The language in that I think is correct. But then the one above it have tried to keep it at the 26 budget at the maximum levy. Does that all make sense as far as the words used there?
Yeah, I guess I probably wouldn't say that it was a stated goal to be at the maximum levy. But you have been at your max levy for the current year. You know, obviously there were these unused levy amounts. I think, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but I think they go back a few years.
Right.
And they were available for you to use. So I wouldn't say it was a stated goal that we keep you at the max levy. But that's typically where you end up just because of the levy constraints and, you know, what happens with your shopping basket full of goods and services that you purchase. You typically are at pretty much the max.
So for the minutes, is it okay the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that because I can explain it, you know, if anybody would ever question it. If you would choose to, I mean, I think it may be a little bit strong that we try to keep you at the max levy. I think inevitably you are probably at your max levy. It's not a goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So any other discussion on the minutes? Ready to vote then? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will go to 4B, Financial Consultants Update and Report from Steve and Mike.
Thank you. This is Steve. I'll start off here if Mike wishes to jump in and add any commentary. We both looked at the report, looked at your financials. So this is 11/12 of the year through November 30th, or about 92% of the year completed. Things look, you know, fairly typical for the county. If you compare this year to last year, the one big thing, Dan, if you just want to scroll up just a little bit to the general fund, you'll see that revenues are down a little bit this year. Last year, you had the unusual transaction of that state aid to help with the Sanborn properties. That was 1.8 or some $1 million. So that kind of skews your 24 number. I will say that currently, if you look at the way things sit right now, your general fund has excess expenditures by about 400,000. So that would mean your fund balance would go down 400 if it ended that way. I can tell you that I did note on our review that, and this is typical, when a department has approved for like a capital item, sometimes they don't charge it to the correct fund. I did note some of them. I've talked to Sue about it. I think when we looked at it, and Sue, I may have found another one for you. But I think there's probably 70 to 80,000 charged to the general fund. So that should be capital. So that would lower your expense side, which ultimately would lower your deficit that you're sitting at currently. Now, we're not projecting anything here as what you're going to end for the year. There were some revenues that, you know, weren't, you know, there's no accrual on it. So like sales tax will be accruing money. So there is a very good chance that we could end up the year at, you know, a net zero, you know, for the year, meaning that, you know, you don't impact your fund balance. And that I believe is our goal to achieve that. So I'm just pointing out, you know, items we saw. Kind of scrolling down there then revenue wise, I think things look good, except when you get down, Dan, to the highway enterprise fund, the other major fund highway there. In that fund, there were two projects I think the county did, a County H project and a County GG, that I think were contracted work. Those haven't been billed out yet to the County Road and Bridge Fund. I believe these financials, I think, were through September, actual for maintenance type activities. I think the bills for GG and H came in October. So those haven't been billed out yet. So when you look here at the other major fund, 4,922,000 of revenue, and then Dan, scroll down to the bottom for the expenses for that fund. In the expense, go to the bottom. 4,922, remember that? And then go way to the bottom. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. 4,922 and
He's
what?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. The revenue, I think, was lower than that. Right now, the fund, yeah, it's 2.7 and 4.9. So those two projects came to about $2 million. So those are not billed out yet. So that fund currently is sitting with a cash, deficit in the fund because it hasn't completed those billings to the other fund. But that will be completed before, too long here and prior to your audit.
Yeah, that's the FLAP grant for GG and the FEMA grant for Madeline Island. So you have to pay for the project first and then they reimburse you. So that's where that deficit comes from.
Yeah, say, Dan, if I can just jump in here because I did talk to Matt about those projects, I think Monday. There's about there's 900,000 due on that Madeline Island grant from not from the DOT, from a different state funding source. And there's 238,000 due on the GG LRIP project. So anyway, and we talked about, I think the county needs to, is maybe slightly behind in billing for that $900,000 grant on Madeline Island. So, and Matt's checking on that, this week. So we should be okay, but there would be about $1.2 million, over $1 million, almost $1.2 million coming in. And that would be a revenue of the county road and bridge fund. Because they're going to be paying the highway department, not to get too complicated with that, but that would balance the books. So.
Yep. And then I think I didn't notice anything else with any other funds that look unusual to me. Mike, did you have any other comments?
No, of course, with the general fund, I don't know if you mentioned about shared revenues, should be in there at
Yep.
this point, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they were
So-
in there. It's through November. I did notice they were recorded, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason Mike is pointing that out to you, is your shared revenue comes in 15% in July and 85% in November. So that 85% is a big number, so. Are there
Any-
questions from anyone regarding this or anything else financial related?
Any questions? No questions at this point then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yep, Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Yep.
Next, we'll go to 4C, Economic Development section of the 2016 comp plan. There's 2 links in there. And I asked to include this in the agenda because on the comp plan update, Brad is vice chair of that committee, and I'm on it also. As we look at the schedule with Northwest Regional Planning, bearing in mind we have an election this year and then committees have to be assigned, they kind of get into the meat of what they're doing as far as updating the sections in the comp plan right around election and shortly after. And then when we passed the budget, the board had an interest in the county looking for ways to do more on economic development. So I thought this meeting and the next few might be a good time to have that discussion, come back and look at the comp plan as a starting place. Gary is, he's board chair, but on the comp plan update, he has the chapter on economic development. So Gary, is here for that discussion and some updates. I could jump in with some things that I particularly wanted to talk about, or if someone else wants to start, we can start with someone else. Dan, can you pull up in the comp plan on the first, the document titled Volume 1. Can you pull that one up and can you go to page 84 of that PDF? So assuming that we've looked at this or can look at it more again later. So I read through the chapter on economic development. Again, this is getting to be 10 years ago, but then we're thinking about updates. And so, there's some good stuff in there. But one of the things that really, really jumped out at me as I looked at that is construction. So Dan, if you go to page 6-90 on the document itself. Yeah, if that's 690. Yep, so 690, look at, and then scroll down just a little bit, but look at construction towards the top. Look at, so I'm looking at construction. So in 2014, there were 680 jobs there. And as I'm looking at this data, I'm thinking about what as a county do we have some input or control over? There's going to be some things like, say healthcare that, we supported the hospital on a conduit loan, but we're not going to be, so directly involved with. Same with educational services. That's a little bit, if not largely out of our wheelhouse, so to speak. But construction jumps out at me for a variety of reasons, one of which is we've talked about housing in the county. But then from a zoning perspective, at the last zoning meeting, Bruce Blakeman, the zoning director, talked about, going down on 13, you're seeing a lot of construction along the highway, and a lot of it is construction-related businesses. And it's zoned so that they can do that. But it sort of creates this, impression of coming towards Ashland, city of Ashland. Is this really what we want things to look like? It's all appropriate for the zoning that's there. But Blake had suggested, some time back about having a business park, maybe a / industrial park too, but a business park in particular. And so part of the answer on zoning might be, is that we do have a business park either in the city limits, south end perhaps, or close to the city limits that would support the construction industry, but also from a farmland preservation perspective, because people buy 40s and then they build something and there's that whole issue there. So from farmland preservation, also having more close to the city would make sense. So the construction kind of jumped out at me as an area that we would have some support for. And then Dan, if you want to go to page 692 of the document. And then looking at construction there, and if you scroll down just a little bit so we can see the header. And this is earnings, the construction, and this is the non-service related construction there, and this is in thousands, the 37,331, but that's in thousands, so 37 million. That's a good chunk, that 37,000 out of the 133,000 further below, again, all in thousands. That's a good chunk. So construction is a major part of labor earnings for non-service related jobs. So then looking further to 693, the next page, this really jumps out at me. And then if you can get all the way to the right on that, maybe the full page view or.
Just hit that little X.
Yeah.
Not that one.
And then if you can close that. So now as we look at construction, the employment on this one is 368, but look at the percent, the header percent above or below average. Construction is at 67.1%. So there's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of money involved with this. And if you've ever tried to find a contractor like I have, it's jaw-dropping what they want. Really jaw-dropping. When we wanted to do the siding and the roof on our house and 10, 12 windows, that came to double what our assessed value is. I'm just not going to put that kind of money into a house from the 1890s. I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm not putting that kind of money in. So long story short, with one contractor, when I'm going through numbers and the job, I finally got him to a point on, what are you paying your guys? And I told him, I think, here's what I think. It was 98 bucks an hour, even for the guy that's new. And I said, I'm just not paying that kind of money for labor. But he says, well, that's what we get. So, okay, so there's demand for construction. And then if you go down to 698, page 698, we're going down a few more pages. And then if you can scroll down, just, I'm going to look at the first table first. And so here, commuting patterns for Ashland County. So I grew up on a farm out by Mason, so I go down Sanborn Avenue a lot. And before they blacktop Maple Ridge in the last couple of years, I used to go on 2 heading towards 63 and down that way. If I go in the morning at anywhere 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and if I come back anywhere like 4:30 to 6, it's amazing the cars that commute into the county of Ashland. So in the morning, you get all this incoming traffic. If you come back around supper time, I lived in the Twin Cities 11 years. It's like, my God, this is rush hour. And I'm not surprised at these tables. So in the left column, with the people who work in Ashland County, people who work here, where do they live? Well, we've got obviously a bunch in Ashland County, but that next group of people on the left column, the 2004 going down, if we add those numbers up, those add up to 2,693. And then the people who live in Ashland County in that next table to the right, who work somewhere else, that comes out to 1,128. The difference is 1,565 people. In other words, we have 1,565 people more that come into this county to work than leave this county to work in a different county. So what that tells me, and when we look at this job data is, and then the incomes in the next, if you scroll down to that next table now, one of the things this tells me is we don't lack for jobs in Ashland County. We've got people from other counties, Bayfield County in particular, coming in here to work. There's employment here. What we do lack are enough good jobs. You know, and our incomes show that. So we have jobs, we just don't have enough good jobs. And then if you look at this data, the thing that jumped out at me that we have some input or control over would be construction. They're making good money. There's a demand for construction. Construction would help housing. It would help not just to build the housing that people want, but to keep prices more reasonable so housing is more affordable. Because when your labor rates are that high because there's a shortage of construction workers and companies, your rates go higher, as I'm sure Blake well knows. You know, he deals with that all the time. So then I come back to what Blake suggested some time ago and has mentioned a few times, is what if we had a business park? It might be a business park / industrial park, as close to Ashland as we could get. That would support the business community if it supports, in particular, industries related to construction and the trades. If we can get more of those people closer to Ashland, we might get more of those people to actually live in Ashland, which would help the city, obviously. And housing, ideally, we would have, you know, building on vacant sites within the city limits, you know, the infill, you know, for road, water, and sewer, infill makes sense. So if more of those businesses could locate in or close to Ashland, we might get more infill, which then helps with the farmland preservation and then reduces the concern that zoning had. So anyway, looking at this chapter and data, you know, if we're going to look at doing something, what Blake had suggested a while back, I think this data supports that. And the other thing I want to note is, and I won't ask Dan to go back to the other document, but when the county or the when the county board passed the last comp plan in 2016 on economic development, the first thing on there, and that's the one thing that had 3 stars, was hire a grant writer. You know, those of us who've been on finance for a while, which I think is all of us, we've been here long enough. When Mike Berlin was chair from 2020 to 2024, he in particular pushed for a grant writer, and it was pushed for for economic development. So there's two main things that come to my mind as Gary thinks about updating his chapter. One is, to what extent do we use the grant writer to help with economic development? And what direction, if we do that, would we want to go? And from reading the chapter and thinking about this, I think the data supports that idea of a business park in or close to the city of Ashland and supporting businesses related to construction. Blake?
Pat, thank you for continuing to beat this topic up. One of the big things that we had happen in our finance was kind of under the radar, but there's now 150 unit apartment market-based rents that are going to go into right across from the police department. And so when you think about economic development, how did that project happen? Well, the project didn't happen because we're a super desirable place to be. The project happened because a very strong developer saw an opportunity to help a community come through with pulling out some funding, right? So how did we do it? We gave them tax credits. So those tax credits that we pulled out, and we're going to have a lot of people upset about doing something like that because, 27 years, no tax increase. But those 150 units now bring kids, brings families, brings some of those construction. All those people that I see driving, coming by my house to come from Bayfield County in, or coming from the UP, those people that work here, now there's going to be some housing possibly that's where they want to be. And so those people live here. All the small businesses benefit, right? Because now they're living in your community. So those are just small things, but that didn't happen without a tax credit. And we historically have been a bit, I say, limited in our ability to pull off something like that. And so a business park is going to cost money. And I think when we start getting to the brass tacks of it, people don't want, I heard a lot of complaining within my Thursday meeting this morning, looking at tax bills and the city and the school district and the county, and oh my goodness. And so how do you go and justify a business park investment? And so I think those are the things that I think we're making some things around the edge. Erica probably doesn't see it. The support, great. Our constituents don't realize it, but that grant writer been talked about for 5 to 10 years. And so now we have it, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years to see that start to pay off, right? But so again, I think there's some unknowns right now with Northland College. And until that plays out, I still think there could be a business park opportunity there. But it's too soon and we're not at that point. So, but I do see some opportunity for the construction trades because we have two things. We have a young workforce that would fit that model. And then we have some business owners that are expanding rapidly and that are willing to invest locally. And so right now we've got a big development happening along the highway. Joma Utilities is building a big shop. And with that shop, they're going to try to expand eventually into training and having a school there. And so those things naturally are speaking to exactly what you are saying. And so how do we as a county, Dan?
I want to say that also, and the school district offers a lot of programs in the high school for the trades. Like you can graduate from Ashland High School with a welding certificate and get a job right away as a welder. They have classes on designing buildings, on designing structures. They have classes on you can start learning to be an electrician. They have all these things that they're already doing to push people in the construction trades because the demand is so great in those fields. So I would, the school is going to continue to do that because that's what they've gotten what the kids want and what parents want. Parents want their kids to have a good paying job, and the kids want a job that's going to be there. So a lot of education and training is already happening in the school district.
Say one more thing. And so when I first started, we went through a wage study. We implemented that. Increasing wage for county employees is one way to increase your economic development. The school district passed a referendum to increase wages for staff at the school district. Again, those wages directly impact a lot of our local area because those teachers live in our communities. And so Tamarack Health is building a $12.5 million facility, which is going to attract some of those higher end type workers that are now going to need places to live. And so, I think there has been some things under the radar in our county that have recently put us in a direction that could be good. It takes time for these things and there's unknowns, but when we talk about economic development, people got to want to live in the community, like you said, and have housing. And so that's a big nut. And I think if this is done correctly, this could be a big opportunity to bring people into the community with higher wages and float everything up.
So my question is Gary's, since he has this chapter for the comp plan update and the board would like us to come up with some ideas on economic development. So as I look at this construction and the, business park, the business per se park, the campus has some potential there, at least parts of it. But, for the construction trades, they're going to want, largely buildings that might look more like an industrial park, but do we want, and again, I'm thinking about the construction south of town, could we try to pull some of that closer to town and have more direct benefit, for the city of Ashland, the tax base, and maybe some people choose to live here because the business they work out of is, well, close to the city versus, a longer drive down. Do we want to explore this, or Gary?
I drive that section from north, and there isn't hardly a month that goes by that there isn't another building going up from Marengo north. And I mean, even you take where the old theater, I'm dating myself, the Triad Theater, where they have the business, but go south, there's a building going up every other month, and it's all related to some type of electrical, plumbing, construction. Then you go south of Marengo and Eli's sheds. You should go by there today and see what they're building. I mean, they're building huge sheds. So I don't know what kind of a contract they have. But, so there's lots of construction going on. I'm not so sure they would move because I have to be careful here. That group of families, they can do anything for you. I mean, they can build your house from one end to the other. And they're all, Blakeman's Plumbing down there, and then next to them is another one. But like I say, every month that I come up, I see another building going up in that whole section. So that's helping the county. Now, whether you could build a site where you could induce somebody else, I'll give you a good example, and you were talking about it. If you're a homeowner and you want a project done, it is really tough to find a contractor to do a small, so-called small project under 10,000. They don't want it because they're doing all these big ones. Recently, I had to have an electrician come to my house, and he told me he gets $100 an hour, but he had 2 children, both as apprentices. They got paid $50 an hour. So I said to him, who's a good friend, I said, John, why don't you send the 2 kids? I get twice the work for the same amount as I get out of you. And he did. All their work had to be supervised later, that everything before they closed anything up. But I wound up with 2 apprentices for $100 an hour doing twice the work. But you're right. That's where we need to get kids involved in school too. They need to know that going to college, 4-year college, isn't going to get them the big incomes they think in some areas. The trades is huge. We cannot in the state of Wisconsin find welders for the Marinette shipping yard. When I worked for the state and even now, they're screaming for kids to go into welding. Anybody. So we need to push the trades, and maybe that's how you get a work area or something too, and say, who are we trying to get in there? It's electricians, plumbers, heaters, welders, the demand is there. Try and get your car fixed right now. See if you can do it, So we have a need. And so how do we address it? And
Well, that's the question. So I mean,
Right.
if we're gonna do something, is this a direction we want to explore, making it possible for, because if you put in road, water, sewer and some of that, and then you take care of the zoning and, you make it clear on permits, what is gonna be required to be somewhere, those sort of things, is that going to attract more business and make it easier for somebody to build a building and provide those services? Because one of the realities of, and looking at, these flows here, we have money leaving the county because so many people come from outside. And my suspicion is a lot of the people, thinking Bayfield County in particular, people with, on average, better jobs are living in Bayfield County because they could afford to buy land and build out there. And then, we end up with people who are less mobile because their incomes are more limited living within the city limits. But I think the same analysis probably holds true for what's happening to the city of Ashland. More people that have decent jobs are moving not just out of the county, but they're also moving south out of the city limits. And that's part of the farmland preservation issue. So how do we try to get more people and businesses to stay in the city limits? Because sooner or later, I've been here 27 years living here, but I grew up by Mason, so I've been familiar with the place a long time. It really seems like it's getting harder and harder to find somebody building a new building, whether it's a house or a new business within the city limits. We see this construction outside the city limits, either south of the city of Ashland or over in Bayfield County. So in some ways, the whole city of Ashland feels like it's changing to me. The downtown has changed for reasons, in some cases beyond our control, but the whole city feels like it's changing. Where it's a tourist town and people with lower incomes are living here, but you don't see new businesses being built very often or houses except, the golf course or something.
But zoning should change too, because the city of Green Bay has just recently changed their zoning to allow multifamily homes to be built where they never were allowed before. It was always, and it's the impression I get even in Ashland. Okay, so I have a house in Ashland and somebody comes in and says, there's a lot next door, we're gonna build a multifamily home there. Or even 40 years ago when the low income houses were being built all around town.
Yeah.
Everybody said, well, not next to me. Well, they're all over the city. You can tell everyone they all look alike, but
Yeah.
the zoning needs to look at, okay, is the need for multifamily structures? The apartments are going to be a boom, but in other areas of the city, could we and would people allow that to change the zoning so you could put a multifamily home next to a single family home?
Dan?
I was just gonna say, the city has home rule and does their own zoning. So they're the ones who make the rules of where
City.
what you can and can't build. We have zoning in all the unincorporated areas. So the city's the one that would have to change their rules. And we
So
can't-
one of the big things that, and I know this is kind of, thank you, Dan, for making that clear, because as someone who went to one zoning committee and then became chair, I quickly learned that the majority of the population is outside of the Ashland County control, because the city of Ashland is where the vast majority of the population in the county is. And so, but I have heard from constituents recently who have found that I'm the chair. They've reached out with some concerns around, and again, I don't know how this plays in to the future, but data centers, right? Don't want to bring it up here, but that is a topic that and that corridor that you guys are talking about that's being developed, the local townships like White River or, whatever, they have their own and they're very lax. And so things are outside of our control often at the zoning level. And it's kind of shocking to me sometimes to say, oh, Look at what can be done without Ashland County zoning, campgrounds, just boop. So again, but I will say that we should be putting it on the radar because of where we live and protecting the nature and the beauty of it. And I don't want to go one way or the other, but there will be someone that will come here because our population is so low. And so we fit a certain dynamic in our county that data centers are going to kick the tires. And so that's an item that in our strategic plan, we should at least consider what we would do. We don't have to make any judgments because we're not the ones who are going to decide on that, but it is coming. And I've had a few constituents come to me with some concern, and I'm not educated enough other than what I read and say, I just love the area so much. I wouldn't want to put noise or water or any of these things at risk. So, but I'm just one guy. And I won't be here forever. So I think we just want to make those conversations fluid.
On the data center, I also think there's a power generation issue that the Xcel Energy plant couldn't support the power generation needed at current capacity. So there's other development that has to happen prior to a data center coming into Ashland County, is my understanding.
Yeah, there's just nowhere near enough power in this area.
Right.
It would take Excel 5 years to build transmission lines.
But Blake, you're right that should be something mentioned in the comprehensive plan, because it could be there. And whether that is an economic development, or if it's a utilities issue, where it goes in the plan, it probably should be mentioned of what needs to happen or what should be the goal. That's going to be difficult because there's two sides to this, and there's some people that are going to say, hey, it's a great economic development. Others that say it's hard on natural resources.
So Gary, for the next meeting on finance, we should have this on the agenda again, because you got a finance committee that's been together for, a while. Most of us have been here for a while. And then come April, you can anticipate it not being exactly the same. But we should also, it's going to take some lead time to decide, what topics we want to work on. So, the construction aspect, that really jumped out at me, and Blake with the business park, or maybe it's a / industrial park, and where we could look at that. But then Dan, on the grant writer position, because it was in the comp plan under economic development, and the push came from that, then, you and the grant writer should have conversations about your thoughts on this. There aren't many direct grants for nonprofits, but if there are ways of bringing in funding to support things that would be good for the county that have an economic development impact, it would be good for us to at least be talking about that.
I think that's on a daily basis. She is bringing in grants for things that may not benefit the county directly, but benefit us. Like the county board established an agreement with the Humane Association. So they need additional space, and the county agreed to give them $50,000, as did the city of Ashland and Bayfield County. Erica, you got over $100,000 in grants for that construction. 28 assured. Right, so she's slowly gathering up the rest of the money to cover that entire cost. That benefits the county because now there's a place to take animals. And we have a place to have a very long-term relationship with to do this. And so it ends up costing us less money in the long run. It's good for the community, and it's a place where people all feel comfortable with animals going to. So she's working on the issues that she can, given the current administration. And there's still some big ones we're applying for, but the rules keep changing. So put up a NOFO, and then 2 weeks later they'll pull it, and it will go up 2 months later, completely changed and illegible. So
I Googled how do counties support economic development. It takes you lots of things to read, but one of the things in there is the reminders that you know, we have a role in certain things like infrastructure development. We can have better roads than the state requires. You know, we could, you know, so we do that. That supports economic development because people, if you're going to live and work or visit somewhere, you want good roads. Broadband expansion, we've supported, you know, proactively being involved with that and some other things. So there's some things that the role of government, you know, is highly involved in. And then there's other things that's clearly not our place. So we need to be selective about that. But then one of the things I have in my notes is I think we need to start putting in writing the things we do that support economic development. And as Blake said earlier, you know, we want this to be a place where people want to live and work. So good housing and other things contribute to that. And I would argue a good animal shelter contributes to that too, because for a lot of people, that's something that's important. So we do these things that make it an attractive place to live and work. A rec center would be nice, and you know that's still on the list. But we should probably start putting a list together for a variety of reasons, one of which so the public knows, and two, as a board, we better understand, yeah, we are actually doing something. So I'll put this on the next agenda again, Gary, and hopefully by the end of March, you've heard this committee hash things out a bit to give you more to work on since it's your chapter. Okay. All right, we'll go to the next item then. D, review of policy for funding outside organizations. I asked for this to be on the agenda again because recently it occurred to me on another issue. My preference would be that for any nonprofits, we ask for a current list of their board members and contact information along with their most recent 990 if they've been filing one, which in most cases they should be. So just in the interest of transparency for everyone, us, the public, that we include those items. And I think it also, you know, helps to catch, did you all get an email about the county and fraud for the, you know, for the audit every year, they ask board members about fraud. Well, it occurs to me that once in a while there's an organization that absconds with money. We know what happens. But by being proactive and saying, we want your board members, current board members, and the reason I stress current is because the last 990 you can find online is a year behind, so the board might not be the most current. So we ask for current board members and contact information and the most recent 990. That 990 will also list the board members, but it's a year out of date. So by asking for that stuff, we are doing a bit to be transparent. But I also think in terms of fraud, serving notice to organizations that ask for money, that the county's paying some attention here. And you can't keep this under wraps because that's how the fraud occurs. Somebody's got the books and the access to the checking account and nobody else is keeping an eye on it. And all of a sudden there isn't money, even if a county is still giving that organization money. So I would like to include those two items in the requests. So-
I would like to add the bylaws as well, so we
And the
know how they
bylaws.
operate.
Sure.
To it is, I agree with you, and knowing that not everybody's going to necessarily read the bylaws, but at least we know we have access to them if an issue were to arise.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And that helps organizations to review their bylaws to see if they're actually current, which should be a good thing too.
I'd like to do, once this gets final, I'd like to see this not only used for the county board, but the forestry committee gives out recreation grants every year. And this should be part of it because I just ran into an issue with someone that has received grants in the past that they're not using it for the right purpose. So if we could get this from all the applicants, then forestry Chris could look at it and say, hey, you know, they're not eligible, or they are. You know,
So you'd have to have the forestry committee for the grants they issue.
right, but if we had this form, they could use this along with their they have an application form that people fill out in this time of year, and then they award the grants in like April or May. But we have a problem with one of the past recipients that this would cure that problem because they're not being.
Is this form available on our website?
No, you have to contact me. We sent it out to all everybody who's interested in a grant. And then, but we can stick it on our website. once we approve a newer version.
So the suggestion is we include for nonprofits, the 990 current list of board members and contact information and the bylaws.
Right,
And-
and
and a
I think we
forestry-
should have and we have to have a contract with these two people too. So I could talk to corporate counsel about a generic contract.
Okay,
That way, everything's spelled out. If they don't perform, we can yank the money, you know.
Is this for 5,000, 10,000, all asks?
All asked,
Everything over okay.
yeah.
so if they're, not every nonprofit, if I understand it, has to follow a 990, you might be really small and there's not much money. And I think there's, in some cases, you don't have to.
If your income is under a certain threshold, you do not file.
Yeah.
There's an easy form, you can just file.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to add to this form, those items.
I'll make that motion. Brad?
Ron will second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Then we'll go to the next item. Dan, if you can put the agenda back up.
Oh,
Next, we'll go to E, the resolution to support grant applications for statewide public safety interoperable communication system.
so this is one of those grants where it doesn't really, it affects us personally now. So the state's upgrading, and Erica step in whenever. The state is in the process of upgrading 911 to next gen 911 or WISCOM. This would help us upgrade our current equipment, radios and stuff. There still may in the future there's going to need to be a tower or a couple towers. We do have an earmark in the Commerce State Justice Appropriations Bill, which Congress has not been able to move yet, despite the Senate's best efforts to get it moving. There's still a chance we can get it if Congress passes it next January and doesn't do a full year CR. If they do a full year CR, we're not going to get it. That's what happened to us the year before. But so there's still a chance that if the other avenue is Bug Tussle, who's a wireless company, they do wireless telephone and internet. They're based out of Green Bay or something. I've had brief conversations with them about putting some towers up in Ashland County, and we could rent space from them, or we could do a conduit bonding with them, and then they could give us space for our emergency equipment or 911. So there's a bunch of ways we can do this, but I'll let Erica go specifically to this grant, which is part of that whole big bundle.
So this grant is specifically, there were two versions of the grant. The one that we can apply for is for radios and or for updating radios that we already own to the 7/800 user model of law enforcement radios. And this, that we would be applying exclusively for law enforcement. The sort of preview to this is that Ashland County is not currently a WISCOM user. Bayfield County and other counties surrounding us, I believe most of them, but not all of them, are WISCOM users. The advantage to WISCOM is that we can connect across counties. For instance, if there is a high-speed chase across counties, or if there is a multi-county disaster, right, where we need multiple operations to go to them. So we are applying for the maximum that we can apply for. There is a 20% match that we would need to show up with. The other piece about this grant, just to kind of lay the foundation, is that WISCOM has been built out really in the corridor between Green Bay and Milwaukee-Madison. And they're shoving millions upon millions more dollars to that area specifically to get that completely fleshed out and finished so they can kind of make sure everything is running. Then they promise, although they're going to take fiscal year 2027 off the list. I don't know why. But then after that, they will come back around to different regions of the state and try to fill us in with the rest of it. We can apply for this smaller pot of money to start to get our radios up to date. And even though they are preferencing that corridor in the southeast, we feel like it is beneficial to us to submit an application anyway. We do think we have a strong chance, but in the end, we think it's beneficial to submit an application to basically show the state we need that funding up here too, because we want those communications up to date up here too. So if there are any questions about this resolution is basically just promising that if we win the grant, which would be $40,000 provided by the DMA, and we would need to provide a $10,000 match for that grant if we win it.
Brad?
Dan, were you talking about the joint dispatch grant that?
That's a different grant.
Okay.
I will say it's not that we don't have WISCOM in Ashland County. We do in most of it because there are towers in Price County and Bayfield County that cover us for the most part. Our problem is, on the northeastern side of the county where we don't have much coverage. The state will eventually build a WISCOM tower there. So we would still be able to use these radios now because of the towers in Price County and Bayfield County. So,
But with the joint dispatch, isn't that mean we already have to change radios?
that was in our plan to do so in the future.
Okay.
It was not an immediate change. That's why we're looking at this grant, so we can start making that change.
And where's the 10,000 match planning on coming from? Would that be contingency or?
Probably contingency. Or, we might have leftover law enforcement dollars from last year, from this current year, which I guess would actually just become contingency money, but
Blake?
This seems like a no-brainer.
yeah.
Erica, for the southeastern corner, are they having to come up with 20% also?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would agree that it makes sense to support this because we really never know
Yeah.
what happens if we have to wait 2 years from now to apply again. We don't know what world we live in as far as funding goes.
Yeah. They all have to provide the match. It's just that they have a lot more money that they can ask for
Yeah,
and then put up the match too. Yeah.
okay, we ready for a motion?
Sure.
Blake?
I'll make a motion that we approve that resolution.
Brad will second.
So we have a motion by Blake, second by Brad. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will go to F, the LaPointe Department funding request.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Gary.
Yeah, everybody can read that request. I personally would like to see the county approve this. I know we have some issues, but it is going to make for public relations much better.
I was actually going to make the same recommendation. It's actually a good use of the opiate funds. And that way when people ask, what are we doing with the opiate funds? Well, we can say we did this, So despite them filing another lawsuit.
No, I was
hey.
going to say exactly what the chair said. So thank you for saying it first. This feels like a little bit of a carrot or something. And I also agree that people should be asking us on how to use these opioid funds. The sheriff, HHS, I've been demanding, keep them coming because we do want to get these monies into the right pockets to help this. So it doesn't do any good sitting in the bank.
I read this and I couldn't help but think about having to do some online training before I retired. And there's certain things you had to do training and living in this neck of the woods. It is hard to get a company to come up and do training that meets the requirements of what's required to be training that is certified. It's just hard because you got small numbers. It's not like you're going to round up a few hundred people. So there's online training, and I've done that. And when I see the numbers in this, what the cost is, I agree it's a good use. But when I see what it costs, it's like before I retired and I knew what some of those costs were, I just say I got in the wrong business. There's clearly companies that are really happy that there was an opioid settlement and they can provide training. I mean, it comes out to about $112.50 per hour per person doing online training. So a company is doing good, but on the other hand, if you came up here and did that in person, and having to travel, lodge, and all of that, there's costs associated with that. So I support this. It's a good use of the funding, and it's a good use in part because, it hopefully makes La Pointe a better place to live and work and helps to reduce costs that fall to their local unit of government because they're better trained. So it's, there's a payback on this to the community, including their finances by having the training. So
Brad will make a motion to approve this request.
Blake will second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will go to the investment report.
The interest rates did go down a quarter point. Which we knew was going to happen when the Fed cut the interest rates. There's talk of the Fed cutting interest rates yet again, and we're going to see our interest rate go down then too.
Any questions? Next, we'll go to sales tax.
Oh, I have a feeling we're gonna be very close. That's about all I can say. October was a pretty decent month around here, so it's still fairly warm and a lot of activities.
I'm not trying to say it, but again, the volatility makes it hard to count on those numbers because it had been trending up over 200,000 for 3 years and then boom. So again, I look at these numbers and I'm always chasing my tail trying to be like, this makes no sense. But we need to make budget a fairly big month in comparison to the last few years. So I think we're going to be down, right?
I think it's gonna be very close.
You
'cause,
think
know,
so? Okay.
If you look at how the numbers have been flip-flopping all year, I think it's quite likely that we actually hit it or almost hit it. Because I look back to October and I mean, there was so much going on in town. And there were a lot of cars on the road.
Well, and I said a month ago, when you go to the grocery store or anywhere else, clothing store, everything's higher. So you're collecting more sales tax. You want to talk about inflation? Well, you spend more at the store, you're paying more sales tax. Every penny counts. We just have to have them shop in Ashland. So we should put some signs up in the southern part of the county to tell them to come to Ashland rather than to go to Price County.
Gary, just so you know that most groceries don't have sales tax.
Well, yeah, some items in the store that are taxed.
And when you go to Walmart, very rarely do you not buy items that are taxed. I mean, you're always going to end up buying.
I don't see the person in Walmart every day says.
At Walmart?
Yes, because I don't buy any. If I do, it's for the state of Wisconsin.
Any other discussion? Then I think that brings us to the administrator updates.
I don't really have much of one. I mean, you guys have obviously seen what's been going on. you took part in it, so.
Did our finance position.
Maybe.
Looks like we're done then. Motion to adjourn.
Ron will make a motion, we adjourn.
Brad, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.